Andrew M. I just started doing commissions as a woodworker and had one of the pieces I delivered develop an issue at a glue joint. How do you work with the customer to rectify the situation while also taking responsibility for the defect? Have you faced an issue like this in your past, and how did you deal with it? Okay. Yeah, I have dealt with this. I built a set of welded steel glass hoods for a performance artist in San Francisco around '92, I think. And that performance artist didn't have a lot of money, and this is before I built something for Dieter. I think I was at the very beginning of making stuff for Freelance, and I charged like $220 for this welded steel welded steel framed tempered glass hoods that this performance artist was using in a performance. And for $250, I just welded it all together. So the glass had some slag spots on it and stuff. And after the performance artist did a performance with it and was moving it, the glass cracked, and they were like, "That's your fault." And I ended up refunding them the whole job. I shouldn't have. I earned my money, and what they spent on those was what you would get for that amount of money from anybody. But I am super non-confrontational, and this performance artist was a friend of a friend, and I didn't want to piss them off, and I just made that problem go away. I'm not saying that's the right way to deal with the problem. You're asking, how do you rectify the situation of something you built going wrong while also taking responsibility for it? Well, taking responsibility for the defect is great. It brings to light how important it is to set client expectations right up front about what you're going to deliver, about how long it's going to last, about how it's going to wear. All of those are really important things, so that when you get to a situation where something's wrong, you've already covered some ground about how you're going to deal with it. Because the fact is when you're doing freelance, the client is the unknown quantity. You think that the stuff you make is the unknown quantity. It's not. The client is the unknown quantity. And no matter who you are and no matter what freelancing you do, you're going to get boned by clients. You're going to get screwed by them. They're going to tell you, "I'm not going to pay California sales tax at the end." I've had that happen. I've had people disappear on jobs and not pay for them. I've had people cost me more to do a job because they were such a pain in the ass. That's all going to happen to every freelancer in the world. That's part of the cost of business, and you got to know when it's happening so you don't take it too personally. In an ideal situation, you deliver a product, a problem occurs with that product, and the client wants that problem fixed. Some of the groundwork you can lay is, okay, if you do have a problem with this, I'm going to need to take it back, and because of my workflow, it might be 4 to 6 weeks before you get the piece back. If you set that up at the front, it's going to be a lot easier than telling the client that on the back end when they're like, "Hey, this leg isn't glued correctly." And you're like, "Oh, 6 weeks, I can fix it." And they're like, "What?" That's the kind of groundwork you can lay. I'm assuming that they're a reasonable client. They might not be. They might tell you that they want you to give them back half the money. And whether or not you do that is based on a whole bunch of different things. How much more work might this person give you in the future? How many other people might this person be able or want to trash talk you to if they leave this transaction unhappy? How reasonable is their request? How much of the money did you earn? I once turned in a job that I failed at mechanically. I eventually came up with a plan B and executed that. And at the end, they didn't choose that. But I was ready to fight for at least 60% of my original bid, because no matter what, I felt that I had earned that in my labor. I was willing to take 40% off the top. They didn't ask, which was, thank God, that was great. They didn't ask, because I felt so bad about having not fully delivered on that job. I was ready to cut right off the top, which is always a really good thing to be ready to do. So rectifying the situation while taking responsibility is really important. And being really clear about how you're going to take responsibility. Like, look, I mean, if you're a carpenter, is the wood you're working with, has it been kiln dried or regularly dried, or could it split? Is that going to be your problem? It could be your problem if you've chosen the wood incorrectly. So that's part of institutional knowledge. But ultimately, setting client expectations so that they know what the progression of agreement might be in the case of a problem is the most important part of that. Second is, I believe in taking responsibility. And sometimes you want to wipe a job and say, look, I'll give you back all the dough. I've definitely done freebies for clients that I really respected and that I wanted to be happy. That is totally also a cost of business. Nobody wants to be taken advantage of, but sometimes taking 100% loss on a gig is the right way to do client management and business management. Crafty Collector says, how do you separate yourself from the fear of not getting the job and not pricing yourself too low? Oh, the toughest part. Oh, the worst thing you ever want to hear in a bid when you're like, okay, so I've looked at the drawings and I've looked at this thing and to deliver this in 5 weeks, it's going to be a $10,000 job. And they're like, okay. Frack. That quick okay means you left money on the table. Oh, that's so awful. And you don't want to bid so high. And this is where institutional knowledge comes in. This is where calling other professionals and asking their advice comes in. Doing your research on the organization. I like to tell the story about, I bid on a job for the San Francisco Maritime Museum many years back. And they wanted they had a scan of a piece of wood. They wanted it printed out and painted to look like the original. And I looked at the gig and looked at the mounting process and the 3D printing process, and I came up with a bid of around $950. And I didn't get the job. I was a little sad about it because I thought I had an inside man like helping me get that job, but I didn't, turns out. Then it turned out, I found out that they ended up giving that job to someone internally for $800. It's just about $100 less than I had bid. And it was like $840. And I was like, they should have just asked me, because I would have taken 10% off the top. I always bid so that I could take 10% off the top in case the client's like, that's a little tough. Because my goal actually in bidding is always to bid about 10% over what the client wanted to spend. That was my freelance goal. And that's just to give myself some wiggle room about what the market will bear and what I can achieve in the gig. It's not about, and sorry, this is a key thing about freelance work. It's not about what a good day's pay is to you. It's about what the market will and should bear. So if someone wants you to make a bunch of swords for a play, they shouldn't be offering you $70 to do that, because that's not a $70 job. That's not what the market will bear. By the same token, you know, like I was saying, in the pharmaceutical industry, the market will bear a much higher price. So you don't want to go bid, you know, $500 for this thing. You want to bid like $3,000 for this thing. I know I'm giving these numbers in the abstract without any attachment to a narrative, and I apologize for that. But look, Crafty Collector, the way you separate yourself from the fear of not getting the job and pricing yourself too low is that you're going to bid stuff too high and not get the job, and you're also going to price stuff too low and it's going to cost you. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support us even further, you can by becoming a tested member. Details are, of course, below, but it includes all sorts of perks, and we're building them all the time. You get advanced Word and behind-the-scenes photos of some of our projects. Questions, you get to ask direct questions during my live streams, and we have some members-only videos, including the Adam real-time series of unbroken, unedited shots of me working here in the shop. They are weirdly meditative. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you on the next one.